The call came at 2:14 in the morning, and Renata Silva knew before she answered that it would change everything. She had learnt to read her phone the way she read a patient's face, the tension of the muscle around the eyes, the small betrayals no one could hide. An unknown number at this hour was not a wrong number. It was a decision arriving to be made. "Dr. Silva?" The voice was low, unhurried, the accent bruised with something old world beneath the polished English. "Forgive the hour. I represent a client who requires your particular talents, discreetly." She sat up in the dark of her apartment, above the closed clinic on Mulberry Street, the neon of the pastry shop across the road bleeding red and green through her blinds. Little Italy at night was never fully asleep. It only lowered its voice. "My hours are on the door," she said. "So is the appointment line. Your appointment line does not perform full facial reconstruction off the books for cash, with no chart and no name. That is why I am calling you and not it." Renata's mouth went dry. She had spent 11 years building a legitimate practice out of nothing. A girl from a Sao Paulo favela who had clawed her way through medical school on scholarships and stubbornness and the refusal to ever be poor again. She had rebuilt burn victims and acid attack survivors, and a woman whose husband had rearranged her cheekbone with a wedding ring. She had never, not once, done anything that would cost her the license she'd bled for. "You have the wrong doctor," she said. "I have exactly the right one," the voice replied, gentle as a closing door. "Marisol." The name landed like a fist. Her sister, younger, softer, still in Brazil, still tangled in debts that Renata quietly drowned every month from 3,000 miles away. Marisol, who thought her big sister's money came only from beautiful Manhattan women wanting fuller lips. "How do you—" "We know a great deal, doctor. That is our business. But understand, this is not a threat." A pause, and something in the voice shifted, almost weary. "Threats are crude. I am offering you a number. One procedure, several months of aftercare, complete secrecy. When it is finished, you walk away $400,000 richer, and you never see us again." $400,000. Marisol's debts erased, the second mortgage on the clinic gone, the nightmares of being poor again silenced. "And if I say no, then you say no, and we thank you for your time, and we call the next name on a shorter list than you would like to believe." The smile was audible now. "But you are not going to say no, Dr. Silva. Women who build empires from nothing do not walk away from the last brick." She hated that he was right. She hated more that some cold, ambitious part of her had already started calculating anesthesia protocols and healing timelines. "Where?" she said, and closed her eyes, because she felt the woman she'd tried to become dying a little. "And when?" A car came for her the following night. Not a taxi, a black Escalade with tinted glass, and a driver named Tommy, who did not speak except to say, "Seatbelt, Doc," in a Bronx growl. They drove north and then west, out of the city's arteries into the quiet money of the Hudson Valley, where the houses hid behind stone walls and iron gates, and the trees had been arranged by people who could afford to arrange trees. The estate at the end of the drive was less a house than a statement. Limestone and glass, a fountain that had been drained for winter, ivy strangling the corner of an eastern wing. Renata clutched her medical bag against her chest like a shield. Inside, The man from the phone was waiting. He was older than his voice, silver at the temples, a suit that fit like it had opinions, eyes that missed nothing. "Salvatore Marchetti," he said, taking her hand in both of his with a courtesy that did not fool her. "The family's consigliere. You honour us." "I'm not here for honour. I'm here for the money." Salvatore's smile deepened, approving. "Refreshing. Come, meet your patient." He led her up a curving staircase, past oil paintings of stern, dead men, to a suite at the end of a long hall. 2 guards flanked the door and did not pretend to be anything else. Salvatore knocked once and entered. The room beyond was dim, lit by a single lamp. A man sat in a leather chair facing the window, his back to her, the line of his shoulders taut as wire. Even seated, even still, he radiated something that made the hair on her arms rise, a stillness that was not peace, but restraint, the stillness of a blade laid flat. "Turn around," Salvatore said gently. "Let the doctor see." The man turned, and Renata forgot, for 1 full second, how to breathe. His face was ruined, beautiful and ruined, both at once. A hard, aristocratic bone structure beneath skin that had been recently and violently broken. A split brow, half-healed. A jaw that had been reset by someone competent but hurried. Bruising in yellow-green tides across a cheekbone that had been fractured. And beneath all of it, beneath the damage, a face so striking that the ruin felt like sacrilege. Dark eyes that fixed on her with an intensity that was almost a physical touch. A mouth that had clearly never learned to beg for anything. He studied her the way a wolf studies a thing that has wandered too close. Not with hunger, exactly. With calculation. With a cold, complete attention that catalogued her in the space of a breath and filed her somewhere she couldn't see. "This is Dr. Silva," Salvatore said. "Doctor, this is the man you are going to give a new face." The man's eyes never left hers. "Do you always look at damage like it's a puzzle you want to solve?" he said. His voice was quieter than Salvatore's, rougher, and it moved through her like cold water. "Or is that only for me?" "I look at it like work," Renata said, because the alternative was to admit her pulse had betrayed her. "What do I call you?" Something flickered across the wreckage of his face. Almost a smile. Not quite. "Gio," he said. "For now, you call me Gio." She did not sleep that night, in the room they gave her at the end of the east wing. It was a beautiful room, silk on the walls, a bed too large for one body, a bathroom of marble and gold fixtures that would have made her mother weep. And it was a prison. She understood that clearly. The door locked from the outside as easily as the inside. There was a guard at the end of the hall who changed at 4 in the morning with military precision. She had traded her freedom for a number, and the number had teeth. At dawn she was brought coffee, real coffee, dark and perfect, by a silent housekeeper named Concetta, who crossed herself when she thought Renata wasn't looking. By 8, she was in the room they had converted into an operating theatre. They had spared no expense. Anesthesia machine, monitors, a surgical light that would not have shamed a hospital, an instrument tray laid out by someone who knew exactly what a facial reconstruction required. Someone had done their homework. Someone always did in this family. Gio was already there, seated on the table in a black undershirt, and Renata made the mistake of noticing the body beneath it, the lean muscle, the old scars, one puckered star of a healed bullet wound below his left collarbone. He caught her looking and did not look away. "You've been shot," she said, to have something clinical to say. "Twice." He tilted his head. "Does it change the fee?" "It changes the anesthesia. You have scar tissue that tells me your pain tolerance is either very high or your judgment is very bad." "Both, probably." That almost smile again. "You're not afraid of me?" "Should I be?" He considered the question with unsettling seriousness. "Everyone else is." "I'm not everyone else. I'm the person holding the scalpel." It's a bad time to be afraid of the person holding the scalpel. She snapped on her gloves. "Lie back." He didn't move. His eyes moved over her face, slowly, deliberately, the way a man reads a document he intends to sign. "Why did you say yes?" he asked. "Marchetti's men, they always find leverage. So what's yours? Money? That's none of your business. You're about to cut my face open and rebuild it while I sleep. I'd say my business and yours are getting very close." She held his gaze because backing down felt, instinctively, like the worst possible thing to do in front of this man. "Money," she admitted. "A sister. A clinic. A life I don't want to lose. Now lie back before I change my mind and cost us both something." For a long moment he simply looked at her, and she had the disorienting sense of being seen, not appraised, not undressed, but genuinely seen, the way almost no one had ever bothered to. Then he lay back on the table and folded his hands on his chest, like a man arranging himself in a coffin. "Renata," he said, as she fitted the mask. He'd learned her first name somewhere. Of course he had. "Yes?" "If I don't wake up—" "You'll wake up." "If I don't," he continued, unbothered, "there's an envelope in Marchetti's safe with your name on it. The full amount. He'll honour it. He honours everything. It's the only thing that makes him bearable." She paused, the anaesthetic ready in her hand. It was, she realised, the kindest thing anyone in this house had said to her, and it had come from the most dangerous man in it. "Count backward from 10, she said quietly. 10, he said, eyes on her. 9, 8, his voice thickened. You have 7, unspoken. The steadiest hands I've... And then he was under, and the room was hers, and the ruined, beautiful face was a landscape she alone could remake. She worked for 6 hours. There is a particular silence to surgery, a submersion so total that the world outside the bright circle of the wound ceases to exist. Renata loved that silence more than she loved most people. In it, she was not a girl from a favela, or a woman in a gilded cage, or a criminal by necessity. She was only her hands and her knowledge, and the miracle of what both could do. She reshaped the fractured cheekbone with a microplate. She refined the reset of the jaw. She addressed the brow, the nose that had clearly been broken more than once across a lifetime. The fine architecture of a face she understood with a strange tenderness, redesigning. They had given her old photographs to work from, but the photographs were of a different man, a man with softer features and a fuller face and eyes that had not yet turned to cold water. She was not restoring Gio. She was inventing him. The face she gave him would be the face the world knew from now on. It felt absurdly intimate, more intimate than anything she had done with a lover in years. When she finally stepped back, sweat cooling at her spine, and looked at what she had made, she felt the old vertigo of creation. He would be beautiful. He would be new. And no one alive except her would know exactly what had been changed. Salvatore was waiting outside when she emerged, peeling off her gloves. "Well?" "He'll live. He'll heal. In 4 months, no one who knew him before will recognize him, and no camera in any database will match him." She met the consigliere's eyes. "You understand, I could hang for this." "We all could hang for something, Doctor." Salvatore's smile was almost fond. "Welcome to the family." The months settled into a rhythm, the way even a strange life will, if you let it. Renata was not permitted to leave the estate, not until the work was complete, Salvatore explained with regret that might even have been real. Her clinic on Mulberry Street ran on a fiction, a locum she'd hired, a story about a family emergency in Brazil. Her patients were told she would return. Her sister was told nothing at all. Twice a week she was allowed a monitored phone call, a guard standing 3 feet away, and she learned to speak to Marisol in the light, empty language of someone with everything to hide. Her days belonged to Gio. Facial reconstruction is not a single act, but a long conversation between a surgeon and a wound. There were dressings to change, drains to manage, the delicate massage of healing tissue, the vigilant hunt for infection, the second and third minor procedures that refined the work. Every morning she sat close to him, closer than most people ever sat to anyone, her fingers on his skin, reading the story of his healing. And every morning he watched her. He was not a talkative man, but he was, she came to understand, an observing one, a man who had survived by knowing more than he said, by watching hands and doors and the small tells of everyone around him. He watched her the way he watched everything, completely. But there was something else in it, too, something she recognized and refused to name. A heat beneath the cold that surfaced when she leaned in to check his sutures, and her breath moved the fine, dark hair at his temple. "You hold your breath when you concentrate," he said one grey afternoon, 3 weeks in, as she inspected the healing along his jaw. "Do I?" "You did it during the surgery too, right before you put me under, like you were about to dive. You were counting backward. You shouldn't remember anything." "I remember everything." His eyes found hers, inches away. "It's a curse." She sat back. Her heart was doing something undisciplined. "Tell me about the man you used to be," she said, retreating into professional distance. "It helps me understand the tissue, old injuries, old habits." Something closed in his face, the drawbridge of a fortress coming up. "The man I used to be is dead," he said. "You're making the man I'm going to be. Let's leave the corpse buried." "That's very dramatic." "It's very true." He looked away, toward the window, toward the grey Hudson beyond the bare trees. "Do you know why they need my face changed, Doctor?" "I've been told not to ask." "But you want to." "I want to keep breathing. Those two wants are in tension." He laughed then, a real one, short and surprised, as if the sound had escaped before he could stop it. It transformed the healing ruin of his face, and Renata felt the transformation somewhere low and traitorous in her body. "They say I informed," he said, when the laugh had faded. He said it flatly, watching her for the reaction. "On my own family. Testified in front of a federal grand jury. Sent men I grew up with to prison for the rest of their lives." His jaw tightened under her fingers. "They say I'm the worst thing our world has a word for. A rat." Renata kept her hands steady, though everything in her had gone still. "And is that true?" His eyes came back to hers, and for one unguarded instant she saw something there that did not match the story at all, something too steady, too clear, too unashamed for a man confessing the ultimate betrayal. Then it was gone, sealed behind the cold. "That's what the records say," he said. "That's what the whole world believes. That's why I need a new face. Because the old one has a price on it, in 3 states and half the graveyards in this city." He caught her wrist, not hard, but with a sudden precision that stopped her heart. His thumb rested against her pulse, and she knew he could feel it hammering. "You should be afraid of me now, Renata. This is the part where the smart ones start being afraid." She looked down at his hand on her wrist. She looked up at his face, the face she was building, the eyes she couldn't stop returning to. "I told you," she said quietly, and did not pull away. "I'm not the smart ones. I'm the one holding the scalpel." He released her slowly, but his gaze did not release her at all. That night she couldn't sleep, and so she did the thing she'd promised herself she wouldn't. She went looking. The house was quiet, the guards rotated and predictable. She found the library on the 2nd floor, a cathedral of a room, leather and dust and the smell of old paper. And there, on a side table, left carelessly, or perhaps not carelessly at all, a folder. Federal court records, photocopies, United States versus Bellini et al. She should not have opened it. She opened it. And what she read made her skin prickle with the first true fear she'd felt since she'd arrived. Not fear of Gio, but fear for him, and fear of what she was starting to feel. The testimony was there in black and white, the betrayal, the names named, the sentences handed down. It was all real, all documented, all exactly as he'd said. But at the very bottom, paper-clipped and half-hidden, was a single page that did not belong. An internal memo, stamped and redacted, that she was clearly never meant to see. She read the one line that wasn't blacked out. And then she closed the folder very carefully and went back to her gilded prison and lay awake until dawn with her heart pounding out a truth she could not yet name. Subject remains asset. Cover integrity paramount. No contact. The words followed Renata into the operating light the next morning like a splinter under the skin. Asset. Not informant. Not rat. Not the worst thing their world had a word for. Something else entirely. Something with handlers and cover integrity, and a mission that required a man to be hated by everyone he loved. She did not know what it meant. She told herself she didn't want to know. She told herself a great many things that morning as she prepped the 3rd refinement procedure, and none of them survived the moment Gio walked in and looked at her and said, "You didn't sleep." "I slept fine." "You're lying." He settled onto the table, unbuttoning his shirt with the unhurried ease of a man who had long since stopped being self-conscious about his body. "You have a tell. Right here." He touched the corner of his own eye. "When you lie, this little muscle jumps. It's very small. Most people would miss it." A pause. "I don't miss things." "You should have been the doctor," she said tightly. "You clearly enjoy dissecting people." "I enjoy dissecting you." It came out low, unguarded, and something in the room changed temperature. He seemed to hear it himself because he looked away, jaw working. "You went to the library," he said. Her hands stopped. "How do you—" "Concetta reports everything to Marchetti. Marchetti reports the important things to me. You spent 40 minutes in a room you had no reason to be in at 2 in the morning and came out looking like you'd seen a ghost." He turned back, and his eyes were very dark and very still. "What did you read, Renata?" The truth crowded up her throat. "I read that you're not what you say you are. I read a word that turns your whole story inside out. I read one line that made me lie awake wanting to save you from something I don't understand." "The trial records," she said. Half a truth was safer than a lie, he could see jump in her eye. "I wanted to know what kind of man I was building a face for." "And?" His voice was very soft, dangerous in its softness. "And it said exactly what you said it would." She met his gaze steadily. "So I don't understand why you look at me like you're afraid of what I found." The silence stretched. Outside, a hawk cried somewhere over the frozen river. And Gio Bellini, asset, informant, the man with 3 names and a face she was inventing, held her eyes for a long, long moment. And she watched him decide, with visible effort, to let it go. "Put me under," he said finally, lying back. "Do your work." But when she leaned over him with the mask, his hand came up and closed around her forearm, gently this time, almost tenderly, a touch that had nothing clinical in it at all. "When I'm under," he murmured, eyes already going soft with the drug, "you have my life in your hands, completely. Do you understand what that means for a man like me? To be that helpless in front of anyone?" His grip loosened as the anesthetic took him. "I've never let anyone. I've never—" And then he was gone, and she was left standing over him, with her heart in pieces, and a truth she couldn't share, and a feeling she had absolutely no right to feel. She worked slowly that day. She was, she admitted to herself, somewhere around the 2nd hour, taking her time, prolonging the intimacy of it, her fingers moving over the face she'd made, as if she could learn him through the skin. "Asset," she thought, refining the line of his jaw. "What are you really, Gio? And why does it matter so much to me?" The revelation of what he was, the true shape of it, came not from a folder, but from a conversation she was never meant to hear. She had been given, after 2 months of good behaviour, slightly more freedom of movement within the house, and so it was that she was passing the closed door of Salvatore's study one evening, on her way to the kitchen for tea she couldn't sleep without, when she heard voices, and heard her patient's name, and stopped. "Can't hold much longer, Sal." Gio's voice, low and taut. "It's been 8 months since the trial. The Rossis have taken the bait. They think I'm a disgraced Bellini looking for revenge, looking for a new home. Antonio Rossi wants to meet, in person. He wants to use me." "That's the entire point, Giovanni. Salvatore, patient as ever. That is what your father designed. You inside the Rossi organization, trusted, positioned. When the moment comes, we take them apart from within. No war, no bodies in the street, just a clean, silent collapse. The families think we're the ones going soft, going legitimate, and while they laugh at us, you gut the only rivals that could stop us. And how many more years does that take? As many as it takes. You knew the length of this when you agreed. You let the world believe you're a traitor. Your own men, men who die for you. They spit when they say your name now. That was the price. That was always the price. A long silence. Then Gio, quieter, and Renata pressed herself to the wall outside the door and hated herself for listening and could not stop. "There's a complication," he said. "The doctor." "Yes." "I've noticed the way you look at her, Giovanni. So has everyone. It's a problem." "I know it's a problem." "Then end it." When the work is finished, she takes her money and disappears. She knows nothing. She can compromise nothing. Keep it that way. Another silence, longer than the first, and when Gio finally spoke, his voice was so low that Renata had to hold her breath to hear it, and what she heard undid her completely. "That's the thing, Sal," he said. "I don't think I can." She did not go to the kitchen. She went back to her room and sat on the edge of the enormous bed and shook. "I don't think I can." 4 words, a whole architecture of feeling behind them, from a man who had trained himself out of feeling as a survival strategy. She knew what he was now, not a traitor, but a soldier so committed to a war that he'd let the world despise him for it, buried himself so deep under cover that he'd surrendered his own name, his own face, everything but the cold. And he had just admitted to the one man he trusted that she had gotten past the cold. She should have been terrified. In some ways she was, but the feeling that rose over the fear, drowning it, was so much more dangerous than fear. The next weeks were a slow, exquisite agony of proximity, because now she knew, and could not say she knew, everything shifted. She watched him differently. She caught the moments the mask slipped, the way his eyes tracked her across a room, the way he found reasons to keep her longer after the medical work was done, asking about Sao Paulo, about medicine, about the scar on her own hand. A childhood accident, a broken bottle, a fight over bread. She didn't tell him she'd started. The way he'd gone still and watchful, the one evening a Rossi lieutenant named Marco had come to the house and looked at Renata a beat too long. That night, Gio had followed her into the corridor after the man left. "Stay away from Marco Rossi," he said low, blocking her path with the sheer fact of his body. He'd healed enough now that the face, her face, the one she'd made, was resolving into something devastating, and this close, it was hard to think. "If he comes back, you leave the room. You don't speak to him, you don't smile at him. I'm a doctor, not your—" He is not a man who understands the word no. Gio's voice dropped further, and his hand came up to rest against the wall beside her head, caging her without touching her. "And I am not a man who tolerates the idea of him looking at what's—" He stopped himself, his jaw clenched. The word he'd almost said hung in the air between them, unspoken and deafening. "Mine." Renata's breath had gone shallow. He was close enough that she could feel the heat of him, close enough to see the pulse at his throat, betraying that his control was not as total as he pretended. "What's what, Gio?" she whispered, and she didn't recognize her own voice, the challenge in it, the invitation. For one suspended moment, she thought he would close the distance, every line of him strained toward it. His gaze dropped to her mouth and stayed there, and she saw the war in him, the cold thing and the burning thing tearing at each other. Then he stepped back so abruptly it was almost violent. "Go to your room, Doctor," he said, and his voice had gone to ice. "Lock the door." "Gio." "Lock it." She locked it, and she stood with her back against it, heart slamming, and understood that she had just watched a man deny himself something he wanted more than his own life, and that she wanted, with a recklessness that frightened her, to be the thing he stopped denying. The thaw came on a night of snow. It had been snowing since afternoon, the estate gone silent and white, the guards huddled at their posts, the world beyond the windows erased. Renata couldn't sleep. She rarely could any more in this house of secrets. And so she'd gone down to the library again, drawn to it despite everything, and found the fire lit and a single lamp burning, and Gio there before her, a glass of something amber in his hand, staring into the flames. He didn't turn when she entered. "I know your step," he said. "I know it in the dark now." "When did that happen?" "You should be resting." "I don't rest. I haven't rested in years." He drank. "Sit with me. Or leave, but decide. Because standing in the doorway looking at me like that is—" He exhaled. "Just decide, Renata." She sat, not across from him, beside him, on the same leather sofa, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, close enough that she could feel him go rigid at her nearness, and then, slowly, breathe out. For a long time neither spoke. The fire cracked, the snow fell. "I heard you," she said at last, because she was tired of the weight of the unsaid. "In Salvatore's study, weeks ago. I heard what you told him." His whole body went still. "I know you're not a traitor," she went on, softly, staring into the fire, because she couldn't look at him. "I know you're something else, something you paid for with your whole life. I don't know all of it, and I don't want to, but I know you told him you couldn't end whatever this is." She turned then, and found him already looking at her, his face, her face, the beautiful thing she'd made, utterly stripped of its cold. "And I heard it, because I was standing in the dark, listening like a thief, because I couldn't help it either." He set down the glass with a hand that was not quite steady. "Renata," he said, and her name in his mouth was a wound and a prayer. "If I touch you, I don't stop. Do you understand me? I've spent my whole life stopping, being careful, being cold. It's the only reason I'm alive." His voice broke, low and rough. "But I have imagined touching you so many times that I've started to think it's the only warm thing left in me. And if I let it out, I don't know how to be careful with it. I'll ruin us both." She reached out and laid her hand against the face she had built, against his jaw, his cheek, the healed line of his brow, her creation, her patient, the most dangerous man she'd ever known, going still under her palm like a struck animal. "Then ruin us," she whispered. and the ice broke. He kissed her like a man who had been drowning and had just been told he was allowed, finally, to breathe. There was nothing careful in it, and yet it was not careless. It was starved, the kiss of someone who had denied himself so long that permission felt like violence. One hand slid into her hair, cradling the back of her skull with a tenderness that contradicted the hunger of his mouth. The other found the small of her back and pulled her against him, as if he meant to fold her into his own body. Renata made a sound she didn't recognize and gave it back to him. All of it, months of unbearable proximity, finally allowed to catch fire. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, the firelight painting them gold. "Say it again," he murmured against her lips. "What you said. I need to hear you mean it." "Ruin us," she breathed. "I mean it. God help me. I mean it." He kissed her again, slower now, and she felt the shift in him, the moment the desperation gave way to something deeper and more frightening, the moment it stopped being about hunger and started being about her, specifically, irreplaceably. His hands moved over her like he was memorizing her, like he was afraid she'd vanish. And when he finally drew back to look at her, his eyes were wet and furious with feeling. "I don't know how to do this," he confessed, and the vulnerability of it, from him, was almost unbearable. "I know how to kill people, Renata. I know how to lie to men who'd cut my throat, how to be 6 different people in a single evening, how to bury who I am so deep even I forget. I don't know how to want someone and let them see it. I've never—" He shook his head, jaw tight. "There's never been anyone I couldn't afford to lose. And now? Now there's you." He said it like a confession under torture, like the words were being dragged out of him. "And I'm terrified, because loving you is the most reckless thing I've ever done, and I've done things that would make you never look at me again." She took his face in both hands. "Then don't tell me those things tonight," she said. "Tell me tomorrow or never. Tonight, just—" She kissed him. "Just be here. Just be Gio. Just be mine." Something broke in his expression at the word, mine. The same word he'd swallowed in the corridor, given back to him now, and he made a low sound and gathered her up and carried her, actually carried her, out of the library and up the dark stairs. And neither of them thought about the guards or the cameras or the man in the study who had told him to end it. Afterward, in the grey pre-dawn, she lay against his chest and listened to his heart, and traced the old bullet scar with her fingertip. "Tell me one true thing," she said. "Just one. Something no one else knows. I want something of you that isn't a cover story." She felt him tense, then slowly relax, his arm tightening around her. "My mother made a lemon cake," he said, so quietly she almost missed it. "Every Sunday. The whole house smelled of it. When she died, I was 14, and my father sold the house, and I never smelled it again." His voice roughened. "Sometimes, on jobs, in some stranger's kitchen, someone will be baking, and for 1 second I'm 14, and she's alive, and everything is simple." A pause. "I've never told anyone that. Not Marchetti, not my father, not anyone." She pressed a kiss over his heart. "Thank you." "Your turn." I started the fight, she said. The one that gave me this scar. Over bread. My sister was hungry, and a bigger girl took our food, and I didn't think, I just... She laughed, low and painful. I have spent my whole life since being careful, being controlled, building something no one could take from me. But underneath it, I'm still that girl who breaks a bottle over someone's head for a loaf of bread. She looked up at him. So don't think you're the only dangerous one in this bed, Gio. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he smiled. A real one, unguarded, transforming, and it undid her more thoroughly than the night had. No, he said, I don't think that at all. For 3 weeks they stole a life. It was a stolen thing, and they both knew it, and that knowledge made it burn all the brighter. In the daylight hours they maintained the fiction, she the doctor, he the patient, Salvatore's watchful eyes upon them both. But in the nights, and in the stolen moments between, they were something else, something the house had no name for, something that had no business existing in a place built on lies. He told her more true things, one at a time, like coins from a hidden pocket. She told him hers. She learned the topography of him, not the face she'd made, but the man beneath it, the wry humour he hid, the ferocious loyalty, the grief he carried for a family that now believed he'd betrayed them. She learned that the coldness was not the truth of him, but the armour, and that beneath the armour was a man who had been alone so long that being loved terrified him more than any gun. And Gio, cold, careful, controlled Gio, learned what it was to want to protect something, not because it was useful, but because losing it would end him. When this is over, he said one night, reckless with happiness, and therefore reckless with promises, when the mission is done, I'll come for you, wherever you are. I'll leave all of it, the whole rotten world, and I'll come for you, and we'll... Don't, she said, pressing her fingers to his lips. Don't promise. This world doesn't let people like us keep promises. But she wanted to believe it. God, she wanted to believe it. She should have known that a house built on lies has a way of collapsing all at once. The summons to meet Antonio Rossi came on a Tuesday, and it changed the weather of the entire house. Renata felt it the moment she woke. A tautness in the air, guards doubled at the doors, Salvatore's voice sharp behind closed rooms. When she found Gio, he was standing at the tall window of the medical suite, dressed not in his usual black undershirt, but in a suit that cost more than her clinic's monthly rent, and the man wearing it was not her Gio. This was the other one, the cold one, the asset. It's today, he said without turning. Antonio Rossi wants to meet the disgraced Bellini who's come begging for a home. The face is finished. Your work is done, doctor. He said the word doctor like a door closing. It's flawless. No one alive would know. She crossed to him. Gio, don't. He turned, and the effort it cost him to keep his face empty was visible in the muscle at his jaw. Not now. When I walk out that door today, I have to be him completely. The traitor. The predator. If I let myself feel anything, they'll smell it. Rossi has survived 40 years in this life by smelling weakness. His eyes found hers, and just for a second the ice cracked. You are the only weakness I have. So today, you don't exist. Do you understand? For both our sakes. She did understand. It didn't make it hurt less. Come back, she said simply. Something moved across his remade face, the face she had given him, now about to be worn into the mouth of the wolf. "I always come back," he said. "It's my worst habit." And then he was gone, sweeping out with Salvatore and 4 men, and the house held its breath. Renata spent that day in a state she could not name, not quite fear, not quite grief, a low hum of dread beneath everything. She wandered the estate. She checked instruments that needed no checking. She stood at the window and watched the empty drive. It was Concetta, of all people, who broke the silence. The old housekeeper found her in the library at dusk and set down a cup of tea and, uncharacteristically, sat. She looked at Renata for a long moment with eyes that had seen every kind of trouble this house had ever made. "You love him," Concetta said. Not a question. Renata considered denying it. There seemed no point. "Yes." Concetta nodded slowly and crossed herself. "I have worked for this family 30 years, she said, her English careful and accented. "I have washed blood from these floors. I have seen women love these men before. It does not end well, cara. It never ends well." She reached out and, surprising them both, took Renata's hand. "But I have never seen one of these men love back the way that one loves you. He does not know I see, but I see. He watches the door when you leave a room. He eats now. Before you, he did not eat. He was a ghost. You have made him a man again." Her grip tightened. "And that is the most dangerous thing you could have done. Because a man with something to lose is a man who can be broken. Do you understand me? In this world, love is not a gift. It is a hostage they can take." The word hostage lodged in Renata's chest like a shard of ice. "I don't. Be careful," Concetta said, rising, her warning delivered. "Both of you. This family is trying to become clean, they say, legitimate, businessmen instead of butchers." She laughed, low and bitter, at the door. "But you do not scrub 30 years of blood from a floor by wishing. And the men who want them to stay butchers, the Rossis, they will do anything to stop it. Anything, cara." She crossed herself one final time. "Lock your door tonight, and pray he comes home." He came home at midnight. Renata heard the cars, heard the doors, and was at the top of the stairs before she could stop herself, every ounce of the day's discipline abandoned. And Gio, coming through the door below, looked up and saw her, and for one raw, unguarded second, the asset dropped away entirely, and there was only relief, naked and total, on his face. Then Salvatore was there, and men, and the mask snapped back up. But later, much later, when the house had gone dark and quiet, and he came to her room and locked the door, the mask stayed down. He sat on the edge of her bed, with his elbows on his knees and his head bowed, and he was shaking, very slightly, the way she imagined he never let anyone see. "It went well," he said hollowly. "Too well. Rossi believes me completely. He wants me close. He's giving me responsibility, access, everything my father designed. In 6 months, maybe less, I'll be positioned to take the whole organization apart." He laughed, and it was a terrible sound. "I did my job perfectly. I lied to a room full of killers, and not one of them doubted me. I am very, very good at what I do, Renata." She knelt behind him on the bed and wrapped her arms around him, pressed her cheek to his back. "Then why do you sound like you're grieving?" "Because when I was in that room," he said very quietly, "being him, being the cold thing, being good at it, I understood for the first time that I might never be allowed to stop, that the mission will always need me, that there might never be an after." His hands came up to cover hers, gripping hard. And I looked at Antonio Rossi, and I understood the one thing I've been refusing to understand since the night I first saw you look at my ruined face like it was a puzzle you wanted to solve. "What?" she whispered. He turned in her arms, and his eyes were wet and terrified and completely certain. "That I'd burn all of it," he said. "The mission, the family, my father's whole design, every year of my life. I'd burn it to the ground before I'd let this world take you from me. And that, Renata, that is the thing that's going to get us both killed." Don Matteo Bellini came to the estate the following week, and Renata understood, the moment she saw him, exactly what Gio would become in 30 years, if he lived that long. The old man was carved from the same cold stone. He moved slowly now, a cane in one hand, but the slowness was that of a glacier, patient, immense, capable of grinding anything in its path to dust. His eyes were his son's eyes, dark, still, missing nothing. And when those eyes landed on Renata, standing at the edge of the great hall where she had no business being, she felt herself weighed, measured, and filed exactly as his son had once filed her. "So," Don Matteo said, in Italian accented English, thick as old wine, "this is the surgeon, the one who gave my son a stranger's face." He studied her without warmth. "You do beautiful work, doctor. He is a masterpiece. I would not know my own boy." "Thank you," Renata said, because there was nothing else to say to a man like this. It was not a compliment. He turned to Salvatore. "Leave us, both of you. I would speak with the doctor alone." Salvatore hesitated. She saw it, then bowed and withdrew. And Renata was alone in a vast, cold room with the man who had designed his own son's living damnation. "Sit," Don Matteo said. She sat. He lowered himself into a chair opposite, both hands folded over the head of his cane, and regarded her the way a man regards a problem he intends to solve. "Do you know what I have built, Dr. Silva? Do you understand the scale of it?" "No." 40 years, blood, patience, sons buried, enemies buried deeper, and now, when I am old, I want to give my grandchildren something I never had, a clean name, legitimate businesses, real estate, restaurants, construction, all of it legal, all of it taxed, all of it beyond the reach of any prosecutor or any bullet. His grip tightened on the cane. But there is one obstacle. The Rossi family. Butchers who will never go clean, who make their money in ways that draw the eye of the police, who will drag us back into the gutter and the graveyard if we let them. His eyes bored into her. So I designed a solution. My youngest son, my best son, my sharpest blade, becomes a traitor in the eyes of the world. He suffers it. He lets his brothers spit his name. And he goes inside the Rossies, and when the moment is right, he ends them. Silently, cleanly, and my family walks free into the light over their graves. He leaned forward. That is the plan, Doctor. That is what I have spent everything to build. Years. And you— His voice dropped, soft and terrible. You are a variable I did not account for. Renata's mouth had gone dry, but she lifted her chin. I've done my job. The face is finished. I'll take my payment and disappear. I have no wish to be a variable in anything. You would say that. The old man almost smiled. But you love him. Do not insult me by denying it. I have watched men lie to me for 40 years. I know the difference between a woman telling the truth and a woman telling a story. You love him, and worse, the smile vanished. He loves you. I saw it the moment I walked in. He looked at me, his own father, and then he looked at the door, wondering if I would hurt you. Don Mateo shook his head slowly. In 40 years, my son has never once looked at a door that way. You have made him afraid, Doctor, and a soldier who is afraid to die is a soldier who has already failed. He would never fail you, Renata said, and heard the fierceness in her own voice. He's given you his whole life, his name, his face, everything he was, and you sit there and worry that he might have kept one small human thing for himself? Something flickered in the old man's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she had teeth. You are not what I expected, he admitted. I expected a mercenary, a woman who cuts faces for cash and asks no questions. He studied her anew. You are a mercenary who fell in love with the merchandise. That is worse. Mercenaries can be paid. Women in love cannot be trusted to do the sensible thing. What do you want from me? Don Mateo rose slowly, leaning on the cane, and for a moment the immense weight of him filled the room. I want you to leave, he said, when the last of the aftercare is done. 2 weeks, Marchetti tells me. You take your money and you go, and you never contact my son again. Let him believe you chose to. Let him think you were only ever in it for the payment. Break it cleanly, so that the wound heals and the soldier comes back to me whole. His eyes held hers. Do this, and you save his life. Because I promise you, Doctor, if you stay, if this thing between you continues, the Rossies will learn of it. They learn everything eventually. And the day they learn that my son loves you is the day you become the rope they use to hang him. You will not be his happiness. You will be his death. Do you understand? Renata sat very still and felt the truth of it settle over her like snow, cold and quiet, and burying everything. 2 weeks, she said finally, her voice steady, though her heart was breaking. And then I decide. Not you. Me. Don Mateo regarded her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he inclined his head, the smallest gesture of respect from a man who gave it to almost no one. You have courage, he said. I understand now why he loves you. It makes what must happen sadder, but it does not make it less necessary. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it is worth, Doctor, I hope you choose to save him. It is the only version of this story where anyone survives. And he was gone, and Renata sat alone in the cold, vast room and understood that she had just been handed the cruelest choice of her life: to break Gio's heart in order to keep it beating. She did not tell Gio about the conversation with his father. That was the first lie she told him, and it opened a door she couldn't close. For a man who missed nothing, he was terribly easy to deceive when he wanted to be, because he wanted, so badly, to believe that the stolen life could last, that the 2 weeks stretching ahead of them were only more nights, more coins from hidden pockets, more of the warm, impossible thing they'd built in a house of ice. He didn't see the grief she was carrying because he wasn't looking for it. He was, for the first time in his careful life, happy, and happiness had made him blind. It broke her heart to watch. "You're quiet tonight," he murmured, one evening tracing a lazy pattern on her bare shoulder. They were in her room, the snow long melted into a raw grey March, the estate settling toward the end of her tenure. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." The tell jumped at the corner of her eye. She turned her face away before he could see it. "Tired. The last procedures took a lot out of me." He didn't push, but she felt him file it away the way he filed everything. 2 weeks, he said, after a while, and there was a lightness in his voice that she couldn't bear. 2 weeks and your work is officially done. And then... He propped himself on an elbow, looking down at her, his remade face soft in the lamplight. "Then we make a plan, a real one. I've been thinking. There's a way to do this. Marchetti has contacts, safe houses, papers, money the family can't trace. I take you somewhere warm. I finish the mission from a distance, or..." His jaw tightened. "Or I don't finish it at all. I've been thinking that, too." "Gio, I mean it, Renata." The lightness was gone now, replaced by something fierce. "I've given them everything. My name, my brothers, my whole life. At some point, a man is allowed to keep something for himself. At some point, the debt is paid." He took her face in his hands. "I want the debt to be paid. I want you. I want an after. For the first time in my life, I want to survive something instead of just enduring it." And there it was, the exact trap his father had warned her about. A soldier who wanted to survive, a blade that had gone soft in the one place a blade could not afford to be soft. She was doing it. Just by existing, just by loving him back, she was killing him. "You're dreaming," she said gently, and it took everything she had to say it. "This world doesn't let men keep things, Gio. You told me that yourself. That first night you said it. You said loving me was the most reckless thing you'd ever done. And I'd do it again, 1,000 times. That's what frightens me." He kissed her then, slow and certain, as if he could kiss the doubt out of her, and God help her, for a few hours she let him. She let herself pretend. She let herself believe in the safe house and the warm place and the paid debt and the after. Because in 2 weeks she was going to have to decide whether to take his father's poison offer and shatter this on purpose, or to hold on to it and let the Rossis find the crack and use her to break him. There was, she was beginning to understand, no version where she got to keep both her love and his life. The universe, as it turned out, was not inclined to give her 2 weeks. It happened on the 8th day. A car she didn't recognize came up the drive at an hour when no cars should come, and the tension in the house spiked so hard she felt it before she heard the shouting. She was in the medical suite when Salvatore burst in, his composed mask gone, his face grey. "Where is he?" the consigliere demanded. "Bellini, where is he? Is he with you?" "He's meeting with the Rossi people in the city," Renata said, alarm flooding her. "He left this morning. Salvatore, what's happening?" "There's been a leak." Salvatore's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Someone in the organization, we don't know who yet, someone has been talking to the Rossis, feeding them things." He raked a hand through his silver hair. "They think it might be someone close, someone with access." Salvatore gripped the edge of the surgical table. "If the Rossis have a source inside us, they may already suspect what Giovanni really is. The whole operation could be compromised. He could be walking into a room right now that knows he's a lie." Renata's blood turned to ice. "Call him. Warn him." "We can't. Any contact now is a risk. If they're watching his phone, a warning is a confession." Salvatore's jaw worked. "He's on his own in there. He has to feel it himself. He has to survive on instinct." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw something almost human in the old consigliere's eyes. "Pray, doctor, if you know how. Pray he's as good as his father thinks he is." The hours that followed were the longest of Renata's life. She sat in the medical suite because she couldn't bear to be anywhere she couldn't see the drive. She thought about Concetta's words, "Love is not a gift, it is a hostage they can take." She thought about Don Matteo's warning, "The day they learn my son loves you is the day you become the rope." She thought about Gio in some room in the city, wearing the face she'd made, lying to men who might already know he was lying, one wrong flicker of the eye away from a bullet. She thought, "I did this. My love made him soft. If he dies tonight, it's because I taught him he had something to lose." At 9 that evening, the cars returned. She was at the window. She watched them come up the drive too fast, watched the doors fly open, watched men move with the particular urgency that means something has gone wrong. And she watched Gio get out, alive, upright, moving under his own power, and felt her knees nearly give with relief before she registered the blood on his shirt. She was down the stairs before she decided to move. "It's not mine," he said sharply, catching her by the shoulders in the great hall before she could touch him, before she could betray them both in front of everyone. His eyes were black and blown wide with adrenaline, the asset and the man warring in them. "Renata, look at me. It's not my blood." Lower, only for her. "Not here. Please, not here." She stepped back. She let her hands fall. She let the mask come up over her own face, and she saw him register it, saw him understand that she'd learned, finally, to hide what she felt, and saw the flash of grief in his eyes that she'd had to learn it at all. "What happened?" Salvatore demanded. Gio's face went cold. "The meeting was a test," he said flatly. "Antonio Rossi's nephew, Marco, the one who came here, he's been pushing to have me killed for weeks, doesn't trust the disgraced Bellini. Tonight he moved on it without Antonio's blessing, pulled a gun on me in the back room of the club." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "I took it from him, and I put it in his mouth in front of 6 of Antonio's men. and I made a very persuasive argument about loyalty. He said it without emotion, and the lack of emotion was the most frightening thing Renata had ever heard. Antonio was impressed. Marco is alive, barely, and he'll never challenge me again. My position is stronger than it was this morning. And the leak? Salvatore pressed. The source. I don't think there's a leak inside us. Gio's eyes flicked just once to Renata and away. I think Marco was acting alone. But Salvatore... And here his voice dropped, and something in it made the hair rise on Renata's neck. When I had the gun in his mouth, he said something. He was trying to save himself. He said... Gio stopped. His hands, she noticed, were not quite steady. He said, Antonio has been asking questions. About me. About where I've been the last year. About... His eyes found Renata's and held, and she saw the fear in them for the first time, real and total. About whether a man who's been hiding for a year might have had help hiding. The kind of help that leaves a paper trail. The kind of help a doctor might provide. The room went very still. They don't have anything, Gio said, too quickly, to the room, to himself. It's fishing. Antonio fishes. It's what he does. But his eyes stayed locked on Renata, and in them she read the truth neither of them would say aloud in that room full of dangerous men. They were fishing, and she was the fish. He came to her room that night, after the house slept, and for a long time he simply held her without speaking, his heart hammering against her back. They can't know about you, he said finally, into her hair. They can't. There's no way. Marchetti built the cover airtight. No records, no name, nothing that leads here. It's fishing, Renata. That's all it is. Convince yourself, or convince me? He was quiet a moment. Both, he admitted. His arms tightened. I put a gun in a man's mouth tonight and felt nothing. Do you understand? Nothing. I've done that before, more times than I'll ever tell you, and I always feel nothing. And I've always thought that was my strength. His voice cracked. But tonight, driving home, I thought about them finding you. About what men like Marco Rossi do to leverage. And for the first time in my life, holding a man's death in my hand, I was afraid. Not of dying, of losing you. He turned her to face him. My father would say that fear is a fatal weakness. He'd be right. And I don't care. I've never cared less about being right. She looked at him in the dark. This cold, deadly, obsessed man who had put a gun in a rival's mouth and come home shaking not from what he'd done, but from what he might lose. And she made her decision. She would not take his father's poison. She would not break this on purpose. If loving him was going to kill them, then let it be the truth that killed them, not a merciful lie. She was done being careful. She'd been careful her whole life. Careful had gotten her a gilded cage and a broken heart either way. Then stop trying to convince either of us, she said, and pulled him down to her. And just be afraid with me. Tonight. Together. Outside, the March wind moved through the bare trees, and somewhere in the city, Antonio Rossi was asking questions, and the paper trail he was following, thread by patient thread, led north, through a locum on Mulberry Street, through a clinic with a story about Brazil, through a woman who had vanished for a season, straight to the house of ice, where two people held each other in the dark and pretended, for one more night, that they had time. The end of the beginning arrived in a manila envelope. It came, as these things do, disguised as something ordinary, hand-delivered to the estate by a courier who was not a courier, addressed to no one, left at the gate. Salvatore opened it in his study, and then, grey-faced, called for Gio. And Gio called for no one, but Renata knew something had shattered the moment she saw his face at breakfast the next morning. He didn't come to her. That was how she knew. For weeks he had found her every morning, wordless, just to be near. That morning he was gone, closed in with Salvatore behind doors that stayed shut for hours. When he finally emerged, the man who found her in the medical suite was the asset, fully and terribly, the cold thing wearing the beautiful face she'd made. "We have a problem," he said. He set the envelope's contents on the surgical table, a single photograph. It was of her, taken through the window of her own clinic on Mulberry Street, months old from before all this, her in her white coat, laughing at something a patient had said. Ordinary, innocent. And on the back, in block capitals, 3 words that turned the whole world to ash. "We know her." "Antonio," Gio said, his voice utterly flat. "It's a message. He's telling me he's found the thread. He's telling me he knows there was a doctor, and he's found her. And he wants me to understand that he can reach her whenever he chooses." His hands were flat on the table, pressing down, as if holding himself in place by force. "He doesn't have you yet. If he had you, he wouldn't send a picture. He'd send a demand. This is him showing me the knife before he uses it. It's a test. He's watching how I react." "And how are you reacting?" "Perfectly," he said, and the word was a wound. I looked at Salvatore, and I said, "So kill the doctor. She's a loose end anyway. I never liked leaving her alive." His eyes came up to hers, and they were black with agony beneath the ice. That's what the asset would say. That's what a man with no weakness would say. And Antonio's watching, so that's what I have to be, and I said it, Renata. I stood there and I said, "Kill the woman I—" He stopped. His control was a dam with cracks running through it. "They have to move you," he said, forcing the words back into flatness. "Tonight. Marchetti has a safe house upstate, off every grid. You disappear, completely. Antonio loses the thread, the operation survives, and you," his jaw clenched, "you go home. To your clinic, to your sister, to your life. When it's safe, in a year, maybe 2, when the mission's done and the Rossis are gone. And you?" "I finish it." His voice didn't waver, only his eyes betrayed him. "I finish what my father built. It's the only way to make you safe. End them before they can reach you. As long as the Rossis exist, they can hunt you. So I take them apart, and then there's no one left who knows your face, and then—" He couldn't finish. "And then you come for me," she said softly. "Like you promised." "I don't make promises this world won't let me keep." He came around the table then, and the asset finally broke, and he took her face in his hands with a desperation that frightened her. "But I'm making one anyway. Do you hear me? I have never wanted to survive anything the way I want to survive this. I will end them, and I will find you, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that loving you wasn't the thing that killed us both. That's my promise. That's the only one I've ever meant." She kissed him. It tasted like goodbye. They moved her that night. It should have worked. Everything about it was correct. The timing, the route, the two cars, the men Marchetti trusted most, the safe house that existed in no record anywhere. Renata sat in the back of the second car with her medical bag in her lap and watched the estate shrink and vanish behind the trees, and thought about a man standing at a window watching her leave, forbidden even to say goodbye where anyone could see. They took back roads. They doubled back twice to shake any tail. Tommy drove the lead car, and a man named Vince drove hers, and both of them were alert, professional, good at their work. It wasn't enough. The thing about a family that has been butchers for 40 years is that they are very, very good at the parts of this world that stay ugly. And Antonio Rossi had not sent that photograph as a test. He had sent it as a distraction, to see whether the Bellinis would move to protect the doctor and therefore to confirm that she mattered. When Gio had said kill her, it had bought her nothing, because Antonio had already had his answer the moment they doubled the guard on the estate the week before. He was not fishing anymore. He was reeling in. The roadblock came on a dark stretch of county road 40 minutes from the safe house. A truck jackknifed across both lanes, hazards flashing, the picture of an accident. Tommy's car slowed in front. Vince cursed and reached for his phone. They came out of the tree line on both sides, fast and silent, and there were too many of them, and it was over in 90 seconds. Renata's last clear memory before the bag came down over her head was Vince slumped against the wheel, and a man's voice, young, cruel, familiar. The voice of Marco Rossi, who was supposed to have been broken, saying almost gently into her ear, "Hello, Doctor. My uncle would very much like to meet the woman who gave a traitor a new face. And your friend Gio," she felt him smile against her hair, "your friend Gio is going to come running. They always run in the end. It's the only interesting thing about men like him. Find the thing they love, and you find the leash. And then the dark, and the dark, and the dark." Gio was cleaning a gun he didn't need to clean when the call came. He had been doing it for an hour, breaking it down, oiling it, reassembling it, breaking it down again, the way he did everything he did to keep his hands busy while his mind gnawed at a thing it couldn't stop gnawing. She was gone. She was safe. She was gone, and she was safe, and both of those facts were carving him open, and he had discovered that a man could be relieved and gutted in exactly the same breath. He would finish it, he told himself. He would take the Rossis apart. He would find her. He had said it, and he had meant it, and he would... His phone rang. A number he didn't know. He answered it because a man in his position answered every call. "Yeah." "Giovanni Bellini," said a voice he knew. Old, amused, Italian to the bone. Antonio Rossi, who was not supposed to know that name. Who was supposed to believe Gio was a disgraced Bellini, yes, but who was never, ever supposed to say Giovanni in that particular tone. The tone of a man who has learned a secret and is savouring it. Every muscle in Gio's body went still. "You have the wrong—" "Don't." Antonio's voice was warm, almost affectionate, the warmth of a cat with a bird under its paw. "Please, We're past that, you and I. I've had a very illuminating few days. Do you know what I've learned? A pause, luxuriant. I've learned that a man who testifies against his own family, who lets his brothers rot in prison, who takes a new face and a new name and crawls into my house looking for a home, such a man does not weep for a doctor. Such a man does not double his guards to move her upstate in the dead of night. Such a man is not, I think, a traitor at all. The purr sharpened. Such a man is a plant, Giovanni. Your father's plant. I have wondered for a year why the Bellinis went so quiet, so legitimate, so eager to shake hands and go clean. Now I understand. They weren't going soft. They were setting a trap. And you, a low laugh, you are the trap. How long, I wonder, until the springs would have snapped shut on my throat? Months? Weeks? Gio said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't confirm it. The silence itself was confirmation, and they both knew it. I could kill you, Antonio went on, conversational. I know where you sleep now. The doctor's people were not as careful as they believed. I could send men tonight and be done with you, and go back to my comfortable war with your father. Families killing families, the way God intended. A sigh. But that would be wasteful. And I am old, and I have learned that a wasted enemy is worse than a dead one. So instead, I'm going to make you an offer. I don't take offers from dead men, Gio said, because the asset had to say something, because the silence had gone on too long. Ah, there he is, the cold one, Antonio chuckled. But we're past that too, aren't we? Because I have something of yours, Giovanni, something you'd burn your father's whole beautiful plan to keep. Would you like to hear her voice? The world tilted. There was a rustle, a scrape, and then, small and frightened and furious and hers, Renata's voice. Gio, don't. Fast, breathless, defiant even now. Don't you dare. Whatever he wants, don't give it to him. Don't you dare throw away everything you... The sound cut off. A hand over her mouth. Antonio's voice returned, smooth as poured oil. A remarkable woman, he said, even now. Telling you to let her die for your father's plan. If I were a sentimental man, I'd be moved. A pause that was a blade. But you're not going to listen to her, are you, Giovanni? Because I heard something in that year I watched your family. I heard that the youngest Bellini, the cold one, the perfect soldier, he changed. Somewhere in a house upstate, over a winter, he went and did the one thing his father never accounted for. He fell in love with the doctor who made his face. Antonio's voice dropped, soft and terrible and certain. And a soldier in love is not a soldier anymore. He's just a man with a leash around his throat. And I am holding the leash. Gio's hand had gone white around the phone. His whole life, the mission, the years, the buried name, his brothers spitting in prison, his father's 40-year design, the clean name for grandchildren not yet born, all of it hung in the balance against a single, frightened voice telling him to let her die. He heard his father in his head. A soldier who is afraid to die is a soldier who has already failed. She will not be his happiness. She will be his death. He heard Renata in his head, the first night, her hand on the face she'd made. Then ruin us. What do you want? Gio said. His voice did not shake. Inside, everything shook. Simple, said Antonio Rossi. I want you to come to me, alone. No father, no Marchetti, no army. Just you and the truth. Spoken to my face. Yes, I am Giovanni Bellini. Yes, I was sent to destroy you. Yes, my father is a liar and a coward who hides behind his sons. You confess, in front of my men, on your knees, and you dismantle every piece of the operation you've built inside my house. You give me the names, the plans, all of it. You hand me your father's throat. A beat. Do that, and I let the doctor walk out my front door alive. Refuse, or try to be clever, send men, play the soldier, and I will do to her what butchers do, Giovanni. Slowly. And I will send you pieces until you understand that being cold was never going to save her. You have until midnight tomorrow. The address will come. Sleep well. The line went dead. Gio sat very still in the dark, the disassembled gun spread before him on the table, and understood that he had come, at last, to the choice his father had always feared. The mission or the woman, the plan or the person, everything he had ever been against everything he had only just become. He picked up the phone and looked at it for a long time. Then he made a call, not to his father. Renata had been in worse rooms than the one they'd put her in, but not many. It was a basement, concrete, windowless, a single caged bulb, a chair they'd zip-tied her to, and then, after Marco had made her hold his cruel young stare long enough to understand he'd have hurt her if his uncle allowed it, mercifully forgotten about for a while. She had spent the first hour cataloguing exits, none, weapons, none, and reasons to hope, few. She had spent the second hour thinking about Gio. She knew what he would do. That was the worst of it. She knew this cold, careful, calculating man who had spent his whole life refusing to have anything he couldn't afford to lose. She knew that the moment he'd heard her voice on that phone, he had already decided, and that the deciding had probably taken him less than a second, and that every second since had just been him arguing with a decision he'd already made. He was going to come for her. He was going to burn it all down. His father's 40 years, his brother's sacrifice, his own buried name, the clean future for children not yet born. He was going to set fire to every bit of it and walk into Antonio Rossi's house and go down on his knees and confess. And it would be her fault. All of it, because she had looked at a ruined face and refused to be afraid, because she had said then, ruin us, because she had let a man learn he had a heart in a world that hangs men by it. Don't, she'd told him. And she'd meant it with everything in her. Let me die. Save the plan. Save the years. Save the thing worth more than one woman. He wouldn't listen. She knew he wouldn't listen. And some traitorous, human, desperately in love part of her, the part that had broken a bottle over a bigger girl's head for a loaf of bread, the part that had never once in her life done the sensible thing when the reckless thing was survival, some part of her did not, God forgive her, entirely want him to. The door opened. Antonio Rossi came in alone. She had expected a monster. He was worse. He was a grandfather. kind-faced, soft-spoken, a cardigan under his suit jacket, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He pulled a second chair over and sat across from her with the weary courtesy of a man settling in for a difficult but civilized conversation. "You're not what I expected either," he said, echoing his enemy's father so precisely that Renata almost laughed. "I expected a woman who'd have fainted by now. You're very calm." "I've been zip-tied to worse chairs by worse men," she said. "You have good posture and a cardigan. It's a step up." Antonio laughed, delighted. "Oh, I see it. I see exactly what he saw. You have steel, Doctor, a rare and dangerous thing in a beautiful woman." He studied her, not unkindly. "You told him to let you die. On the phone, you meant it." "Why?" "Because what he'd have to trade to save me is worth more than I am." "Is it?" Antonio tilted his head. "Interesting." "Because he doesn't think so. I could hear it in his silence. He's already decided. He's going to trade the world for you, and he's going to hate himself for it, and it won't stop him for a second." The old man leaned forward, genuinely curious. "What did you do to him, Doctor? Men like Gio Bellini don't love. It's trained out of them, beaten out of them, buried so deep it's supposed to be dead. His own father built a plan on the certainty that his son had no heart left to compromise. And in one winter, in one house, he spread his hands, you did the impossible. You made the cold man warm. Do you know what a catastrophe that is? For everyone." "I didn't do it on purpose," Renata said quietly. "Neither did he. That's what nobody in your world understands. You all think love is a strategy, or a weakness, or a leash. It's not. It just happens, in the middle of everything, whether you can afford it or not. Usually when you can't." Antonio was silent a moment. Something moved behind his grandfather's eyes, something old and sad. "I had a wife," he said unexpectedly. 51 years. She died in the spring. And you're right, I could not afford her, not in this life, not for one single day of the 51 years, and I would not trade a moment of it." He sighed and stood, and the sadness folded away back into the butcher. "Which is why I know exactly what he's going to do, and why my trap is going to work. I'm not sorry, Doctor. I'm old and I'm at war, and your Giovanni was sent to cut my throat in my sleep. But I want you to know that I understand what I'm using against him. I'm not a stupid man. I know love when I see it. I'm just a man who's learned to weaponize the things other people are too sentimental to touch." He moved to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth," he said. And it was the second time in her captivity that a monster had said those exact words. "If he comes, and he will come, I may not kill him." A man who'd burn his father's whole design for one woman is a man who's lost to the game anyway. There's no danger in a soldier who stopped being a soldier. "Perhaps I'll let you both walk out." "Perhaps." He smiled gently, terribly. "Or perhaps I'll decide that the son of Matteo Bellini is worth more dead than merciful. I haven't decided. Isn't that the frightening part? Even I don't know yet." The door closed. The bulb hummed. And Renata sat alone in the concrete room and thought, "Don't come, Gio. For the love of God, don't come." Knowing, with terrible certainty, that he was already on his way. Gio did not call his father, and that was the first betrayal. He knew what Don Matteo would say. He knew it the way he knew the weight of a gun. His father would say, "She is one woman, and the plan is 40 years, and you will not throw away my life's work for a doctor you should never have touched. Let her die. Grieve if you must, but finish the mission." His father would be right in the cold arithmetic of the world that had made them both. One life against a family's future, a single heart against a dynasty. It wasn't even a difficult sum, and Gio was going to get the answer wrong on purpose. So he didn't call his father. He called Salvatore. "I need to see you," he said, "alone, now. Not the house, the boathouse on the river. Come by yourself." The old consigliere was waiting when Gio arrived, standing on the dock in the raw pre-dawn cold, and he took one look at Gio's face and closed his eyes. "He has her," Salvatore said. It wasn't a question. "He knows everything." Gio's voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a man walking a wire over a very long fall. "He knows who I am. He knows what I am. He knows about the plan, not the details, but the shape of it, enough. And he has Renata, and he wants me to walk in alone and confess on my knees and hand him the whole operation, or he starts sending her back to me in pieces." He looked at the black water. "Midnight tomorrow." Salvatore was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been grief. "You know what your father will say." "I know what my father will say." "You know that he's right." Salvatore turned to face him fully. "Giovanni, listen to me. I have known you since you were a boy. I helped design this. 40 years, no, more. Your grandfather started laying the ground for what your father built. Your brothers are rotting in cells. They chose to enter for this, believing you a traitor, spitting your name. And they did it because they believed it would mean something, because their children would grow up in a family that shook hands instead of dug graves. His voice cracked. If you walk into that room and confess, you don't just die. You don't just end the plan. You spend all of it, every year, every sacrifice, every man in a cell, for one woman. And she will not even thank you because she told you not to. You'll have thrown away everything and betrayed everyone, and the woman you did it for will hate you for it. "I know," Gio said. "Then you know you can't do it." "I know I'm going to do it anyway." The words hung in the cold air. Salvatore stared at him. "I've done the arithmetic, Sal," Gio said, and his voice was very quiet and very sure. "One life against a family's future. It's not even close. Any soldier can do that sum. My father did it before I was born. And for 34 years, I was the answer that sum wanted. The son with nothing to lose, the perfect blade, the cold thing that could be spent." He looked up, and his eyes were burning. And then a woman looked at my ruined face like it was a puzzle she wanted to solve, and refused to be afraid of me, and told me to ruin us. And I did. And somewhere in that winter, I stopped being the answer to the sum. I became a person. And a person can't do that arithmetic, Salvatore. A person just can't. Because to a person, she's not one life. She's the life. She's the only warm thing in 40 years of ice. And if I let them take it, if I stand here and do the correct thing and let her die for a plan, then I'll have kept everything and lost the only thing that ever made keeping anything worth it. Salvatore's eyes were wet now, this hard old man who had washed blood from floors. "Your father will never forgive you." "My father doesn't have to. He never gave me anything to forgive." Gio's jaw tightened. "But I'm not asking your permission, Sal. I'm asking for two things, and then you can decide whether to help me or stop me." He stepped closer. "First, I need you to not tell my father until it's done. Give me that. 12 hours of silence. That's all." "And the second?" Gio's cold mask cracked, just for a moment, and beneath it was a man terrified and resolved in equal measure. "I need you to help me make sure that when I walk in there and burn my whole life down," he said, "I don't burn hers with it. Because I'll confess, Sal. I'll go on my knees. I'll give Antonio Rossi anything he wants. But I am not walking out of that room without her. And if I have to choose between the plan and her, I've already chosen. But if I can find a way to lose the plan and still get her out breathing, then that's the version I want. And I need the smartest man I know to help me find it." He gripped the old man's shoulder. "You've spent your whole life being loyal to my father's design. I'm asking you, this once, to be loyal to me, to the boy you knew. Help me save her, please." And Salvatore Marchetti, consigliere, keeper of 40 years of secrets, the most loyal man in a family built on loyalty, looked at the son he'd watched grow from a cold boy into something, at last, human, and made his choice. "God help us both," he said, and his voice broke. "Tell me everything he said, every word. If you're going to throw away the world for love like an idiot in an opera, then you're going to do it cleverly, and you're going to walk out of there alive, and so is she." He wiped his eyes roughly, and the consigliere returned, sharp as ever. "Now, the address, his numbers, his men. We have 36 hours and one chance. Let's build you a way out of hell." They worked through the night and into the day, 2 men and a map of a lion's den. Salvatore knew things about the Rossi organization that even Gio hadn't fully grasped. The shape of Antonio's operation, the loyalties that were solid and the ones that were merely convenient, the compound where they'd almost certainly taken Renata. "The house in Jersey," he said, tapping the map. "Old Rossi money. Antonio's father built it. There's a wine cellar under the east wing, concrete, no windows. That's where they keep people they want to keep. That's where she'll be." "How do you know?" "Because I helped a man escape from it once," Salvatore said grimly. 20 years ago, before your time. It cost me things I've never told your father about." He met Gio's eyes. "There's a service passage, a coal chute, from the days when the house burned coal. It comes out in the cellar. It's been bricked over, but brick can be unbricked, and Antonio's grandson thinks the old man is senile for keeping the estate at all. The security on the east grounds is a joke, because Antonio believes no one alive remembers the chute exists." A thin smile. "I remember." The plan took shape between them, piece by piece, over cold coffee and colder dawn light. It was not, Gio understood, a plan to save the mission. That was gone. The moment Antonio Rossi had spoken the name Giovanni Bellini into a phone, 40 years of design had died, and no cleverness could resurrect it. If Gio walked into that room and confessed, the operation was over regardless. Antonio would know everything, would move against the Bellinis openly, would turn Gio's confession into a weapon. The war his father had spent a lifetime trying to avoid would come. And it would come because of Gio, because of a doctor, because of love. He made his peace with that in the grey hours. It was, he found, easier than he'd expected. A man discovers his true priorities in the moment he's asked to spend everything, and Gio discovered his without much surprise. He'd known, since the first night by the fire, that if it ever came to this, he would choose her. He'd just spent months pretending he wouldn't have to. "Here's what I don't understand," Salvatore said, near the end, rubbing his eyes. "The confession buys her freedom," Antonio says. "Fine, but you don't believe him. I can see it. So why walk in at all? Why not just go in through the chute, take her, and run? Because he'll have her guarded, and the moment shots start, she's dead," Gio said. "The only thing keeping her alive right now is that I haven't arrived yet. She's bait. Bait stays fresh until the trap springs. The second Antonio decides a trap has failed, the second he thinks I've sent men instead of coming myself, he has no reason to keep her alive." He traced the map. "So, I give him the trap he wants. I walk in the front door, alone, on time. I let him have his theatre, the confession, the knees, all of it. I keep every eye in that house on me." And while Antonio Rossi is savouring the son of his enemy grovelling on the floor, someone comes up through the chute, Salvatore finished softly, and takes her out the back. "Someone I trust with my life, someone she'll trust enough to move fast and quiet." Gio looked up. "It can't be you. He knows your face. It has to be someone the Rossis have never seen, someone who can get her out while I hold the room." Salvatore was quiet. Then, "Concetta's nephew, Danny. Ex-army, ranger, did 2 tours. He's driven for us 6 months. Clean face, no record with them, and Concetta would open a vein for you after what you did for her boy last winter." He paused. "But Giovanni, you understand what this means for you. If your plan works, Renata gets out, and you're still standing in a room full of Rossi men who now know exactly who and what you are. And you've confessed to a plot to destroy them, and your only leverage, her, is gone." His voice dropped. "You're not planning to walk out at all, are you?" Gio didn't answer for a long moment. Outside, the sun had fully risen over the river, gold on the black water. "I'm planning to try," he said finally. "I want to live, Sal. For the first time in my life, I genuinely want to live. Because now there's a life I want to live for. But if the arithmetic comes down to her breathing, or me breathing—" He shrugged, and the shrug was the most terrifying thing Salvatore had ever seen, because it was so calm. "Then I've already done that sum too. And she comes out. That's the whole plan. Everything else is negotiable. That part isn't." Salvatore looked at the boy he'd watched become a man, and the man he'd watched become, impossibly, someone capable of love. And he felt something he hadn't felt in 40 years in this cold business. He felt hope, and it terrified him worse than any gun. "Then let's make sure the sum never comes to that," he said roughly. "Let's make you so clever that you both walk out, because I did not spend a lifetime keeping your family alive to lose the only one of you who ever became a human being." He stood, joints cracking, and for a moment the old consigliere looked every one of his years. "Call Concetta, wake up Danny, and Giovanni." Gio looked up. "When this is over," Salvatore said, "whatever happens, I want you to know that helping you throw away the plan for her is the first thing I've done in this life that I'm not ashamed of. Now go save your doctor, you reckless, lovesick fool, and try, please try, to stay alive long enough to deserve her." The Rossi compound sat behind high walls in the flat dark of the New Jersey countryside, all its windows lit like a great ship at sea, and Gio Bellini walked toward it alone at 11 minutes to midnight, with nothing in his hands and everything in the balance. He wore no wire, no weapon. He'd left both behind. A wire because Antonio's men would find it and kill her. A weapon because a man who comes to surrender does not come armed. And tonight he needed, more than he had ever needed anything, to be believed. Every eye in that house had to see a broken man arriving to grovel. That was the performance of his life, and unlike every performance before it, this one had no cover story beneath it. There was no asset hiding behind the surrender. He was surrendering. The only lie left was that he'd come to lose. He was, in truth, the most dangerous he'd ever been. Because a man with nothing to lose is deadly, but a man who has already decided to lose everything except one thing, and will move heaven and hell for that one thing, is something worse. He was calm. He was clear. He was, for the first time in his life, entirely without division, no mission pulling one way and his heart the other. His whole self at last pointed in a single direction, and her name was Renata. Marco Rossi met him at the door, and the young man's face, still bruised, still swollen from the night Gio had put a gun in his mouth, was ugly with triumph. "Look at this," Marco crooned, patting Gio down with rough, gloating hands. "The great Giovanni Bellini, the ghost, come to beg." He shoved Gio forward. "My uncle wanted to be merciful. I told him, a Bellini doesn't understand mercy. A Bellini understands the floor and the boot. We'll see who's right tonight." Gio said nothing. He let himself be shoved. He counted men, 6 in the entrance hall, 2 on the stairs, at least 4 more he could hear in the great room ahead. He counted doors. He measured the house against the map in his head, found the east wing, calculated the distance to a wine cellar he would never see, and prayed to a God he'd stopped believing in years ago that somewhere beneath his feet a bricked coal chute was being quietly opened. They brought him into the great room, and Antonio Rossi was waiting. The old man sat in a wing-back chair by an enormous fireplace, reading glasses on, a book closed on his knee, for all the world a grandfather interrupted at his evening. Around him stood a dozen men, and there off to the side, zip-tied to a hard chair, pale and furious and blazingly, achingly alive, Renata. Their eyes met across the room, and the whole world narrowed to it. He saw everything in her face in that instant, the terror, the relief, the fury, the love, and above all, the desperate, silent scream, "Why did you come? Why did you come? I told you not to come." And he let her see, just for a fraction of a second before the mask came down, the only answer he had. Because it was always going to be you. Because it was never a choice at all. Then he looked away from her, because looking at her was a weapon Antonio could use, and he made his face into the face of a defeated man. "Giovanni Bellini," Antonio said warmly, setting down his book. "You came. Alone. On time. I confess I'm impressed. and a little sad. He removed his glasses. I'd hoped you'd send men. It would have been so much simpler to just kill you all and be done with it. But no, you came to beg for her. Love makes fools of the cleverest men. Your father would weep. My father isn't here, Gio said. No, he isn't. Antonio's eyes glittered. And that, too, tells me everything. You didn't tell him. You came behind his back to throw away his life's work for a woman, and he doesn't even know yet that his perfect son has betrayed him for love. The old man shook his head, almost pityingly. You poor boy. You have no idea what you've become, do you? Well, let's begin your education. On your knees, Giovanni Bellini, and tell my men, tell them all, who you really are, and what your father sent you to do. The room went silent. A dozen killers waited. Antonio watched, hungry, and Renata, across the room, closed her eyes and turned her face away, because she could not bear to watch him do it. Gio Bellini lowered himself to his knees on the Persian carpet of his enemy's house, and as he knelt, slow, deliberate, a beaten man performing his defeat, he let his eyes drift, just once, just briefly, to the far corner of the great room, where a service door stood slightly ajar, where a shadow that should not have been there had appeared, where a young man with a soldier's stillness and Concetta's dark eyes gave him the smallest possible nod. She's out, the nod said. The shoot worked. The girl in the cellar. But the girl was not in the cellar. The girl was zip-tied to a chair in this room in front of him, because Antonio Rossi had not put his bait in the wine cellar at all. He had put her here, in the great room, in plain sight as the centrepiece of his theatre. Which meant the plan had already failed. Which meant Danny had gone up an empty chute into an empty cellar. Which meant there was no one coming, and no way out, and Gio was on his knees in a room full of enemies, with the woman he loved 10 feet away, and nothing at all, left to save her with except the truth, and his own 2 empty hands, and a love reckless enough to burn down the world. Gio looked up at Antonio Rossi, and slowly, terribly, he began to smile. You want to know who I really am? He said softly. All right, old man, let me tell you. My name is Giovanni Bellini, Gio said, and his voice carried to every corner of the silent room. I am the youngest son of Don Matteo Bellini, and everything you have believed about me for the last year is a lie that I helped write. Antonio leaned forward, savouring it. Renata's eyes flew open. I never testified against my family, Gio went on, still kneeling, still smiling that terrible, calm smile. The trial was a fiction. The betrayal was staged. The federal records were seeded by a man my father owns inside the bureau. My brothers went to prison willingly, knowing the truth, because they believed in the design. The whole world was made to believe that the youngest Bellini was a rat and a coward, so that a disgraced man with nowhere to go could come crawling to you, Antonio, looking for a home. He spread his empty hands. I was sent to destroy you, from the inside, slowly, silently. My face was rebuilt so that not even your best men would know me. In another 6 months, I'd have had your names, your books, your roots, your weaknesses, and one quiet night, your entire organization would have simply ceased to exist. No war, no bodies in the street, just the Rossi family gone, and the Bellinis walking clean into the light over your graves. The room had gone utterly still. The dozen killers were staring. Antonio's face had lost its warmth entirely, replaced by something cold and calculating, and beneath it, genuinely shaken. Because he had suspected, but suspecting was not the same as hearing it spoken, hearing the full, breathtaking scope of the thing that had almost swallowed him whole. "You see," Gio said, "I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. The truth. All of it. My father's whole design, 40 years in the making, dismantled here on my knees in your house, in front of your men. I am handing you my father's throat, Antonio, just like you demanded." His eyes moved at last to Renata and held. For her. Only for her. Because you were right about one thing, old man. Somewhere in that winter, I stopped being a soldier. I became a man. And a man doesn't do the arithmetic. A man just... His voice caught, roughened. A man just chooses, and I choose her, over the plan, over my father, over everything I've ever been. So you have what you wanted. Now let her go. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Antonio Rossi began, slowly, to clap. "Magnificent," he said. "Truly. I've been in this life 60 years and I have never heard anything like it." He rose from his chair, leaning on its arm, and crossed to where Gio knelt. "You've just confirmed everything. You've handed me a war I can win before your father even knows it's begun. You've destroyed your family's entire strategy with your own mouth, and you did it for..." He gestured at Renata. "For her. A doctor. A woman you've known for a season." He shook his head in something like wonder. "Your father built a weapon, Giovanni, and a woman with a scalpel took it apart in one winter. Extraordinary." "You have what you wanted," Gio said low. "Let her go. That was the deal." "Yes," Antonio said thoughtfully. "That was the deal." He looked at Renata. He looked at Gio. He looked for a long moment at some private calculation behind his grandfather's eyes. "But here is my difficulty, Giovanni. You've just given me your father's throat, which means that within a day your father will know his plan is dead, and he will come for me with everything he has, because that is what men like your father do. So the war is coming regardless, and in that war a Bellini in my basement is worth a great deal, a hostage, a bargaining chip, a knife at your father's heart." His voice hardened. "And the doctor is worth even more, because she's the one thing that makes the great cold Giovanni Bellini do stupid, reckless, human things. Why on earth would I let either of you go?" Renata's blood ran cold. Gio's smile vanished. "Because you gave your word." "I gave my word to a traitor and a plant who came to cut my throat," Antonio said, almost gently. "My honor doesn't extend to snakes, Giovanni. I thought you understood that. It's the first thing they teach us." He turned to his men. "Take him. Put him in the cellar with..." He paused, frowned, looked around the room. "Where is Marco?" And that was the moment the lights went out. Not flickered, went out. The whole house, every light plunged into total blackness, and in the same instant Gio was moving, because he had spent the entire confession not just buying Renata's freedom, but buying time, keeping every eye and every gun in that room fixed on the theatre of his surrender, and because Danny, Concetta's nephew, the ranger, who had gone up an empty chute into an empty cellar and understood in an instant that the plan had failed and improvised a better one, had found the compound's electrical main instead. In the dark, chaos, shouts, the scrape of chairs, men reaching for guns they couldn't aim at targets they couldn't see, and Gio, who had spent a lifetime learning to kill in exactly these conditions, who had counted every man and every door and memorized the distance to a hard chair in the corner, rose from his knees like death itself and moved through the black room toward the only thing that mattered. "Renata!" His hands found the chair, found the zip ties and a blade he'd hidden in the sole of his shoe. The one weapon Marco's gloating pat-down had missed was already in his hand. "It's me. Don't make a sound. We're leaving." "Gio." Her voice broke on his name. "I've got you." The ties parted. He pulled her up, wrapped an arm around her, put his body between her and the room full of blind, panicking killers. "I've got you. I'm never letting go of you again. Move when I move. Now." A gunshot cracked in the darkness, then another, and a voice, Antonio's, no longer warm, roaring with the fury of a man who has just watched his perfect trap dissolve into black chaos. Find them, and kill them both." They moved through the black house like a single animal, Gio's body a shield around hers, his hand an iron grip that would not, could not let go. He knew this house. He'd studied Salvatore's map until it was burned behind his eyes, and now, in the dark, that map was the only advantage he had against a dozen men who knew the house by daylight, but were as blind as he was now. He counted his steps. He turned where the map said to turn. Behind them, gunfire flashed and roared, men firing at shadows, at each other, at the memory of where their targets had been. And Gio used the muzzle flashes like lightning, freezing the room in strobe, reading the space in fractions of a second. "Stairs," he breathed against Renata's ear. "3 steps down, then left. Trust me." "I trust you." Her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. She was, he thought, with a fierce surge of something that was half love and half awe, extraordinary. Zip-tied for 2 days, threatened by butchers, and here she was, moving through a firefight, with her hand locked in his, doing exactly what he said. Not screaming, not freezing, fighting. The girl who'd broken a bottle for a loaf of bread. His girl. They reached the service corridor. A door. Another. The kitchen. Gio smelled it before he saw it, the ghost of garlic and old smoke. And there, at the far end, the faint grey rectangle of a door to the outside, and silhouetted against it, a figure. Gio raised the blade. "Bellini," a low voice, army flat. "It's Danny. Concetta sent me. The girl wasn't in the cellar. I improvised." The lights. The lights. A grim satisfaction. Cars 100 yards past the wall, east side, engine running. We've got maybe 90 seconds before they get a generator up or start using flashlights. Move. They moved. Out into the raw night air, across a lawn, silvered by a sliver of moon, toward the wall. And behind them, the house was waking into deadly organization. The first flashlight beams stabbing out of windows, the first shouts finding direction. A bullet whined past Gio's head, and he shoved Renata down, covered her with his body, felt her heart slamming against his chest. "The wall," Danny snapped. "There's a gap by the old gate. Go. I'll cover. You go first," Gio said. "Take her. Get her to the car. I'll cover." "Gio!" Renata's hand fisted in his shirt. "Go with him." He took her face in his hands, there in the dark and the gunfire, and for one impossible second the whole roaring world went quiet. "Renata, listen to me. Go with Danny, get in the car. If I'm not there in 60 seconds, you leave. Do you hear me? You leave and you live, and that's how you—" "No!" Her voice was fierce, absolute. "No, I'm not leaving you in this. You have to." His thumbs traced her cheekbones, the face he loved, the hands that had made his. "I burned the whole world down to get you out of that room. Don't make it for nothing. Please." A bullet struck the wall beside them, spraying stone. His voice cracked. "For once in your reckless life, do the sensible thing. Get in the car, live, and let me buy you the seconds to do it." For a heartbeat she stared at him, and he saw the war in her. The same war he'd fought and lost, the arithmetic of love that refuses to add correctly. Then she did something he didn't expect. She grabbed the blade from his hand. "Sensible," she said, "was never going to be my strong suit." And before he could stop her, she was up, moving, pulling him and Danny both toward the gap in the wall, not away from the fight, but through it, using the dark, using the chaos, 3 shadows melting into the gap by the old gate as flashlight beams swept the lawn behind them and found only empty grass. The gap was narrow, half choked with ivy. Danny went first, then Renata, then Gio, and on the far side the ground dropped away into a drainage ditch, and beyond it the black line of the tree break where the car waited, engine breathing, exactly where Danny had promised. They ran. Behind them the compound roared, but the roaring stayed behind, Antonio's men pouring out the front, expecting a car, watching the road, never thinking that their prey had gone over and through rather than out. By the time the first vehicles screamed down the drive, 3 people were already in a nondescript sedan, bumping down a service track with its lights off, and the great lit ship of the Rossi house was shrinking in the mirror. For a long time, no one spoke. Danny drove. Gio held Renata against his chest in the back seat, and she gripped him like she'd fall off the world if she let go, and neither of them could quite believe they were breathing. "You came," she said finally into his shirt. It was half accusation, half wonder. "I told you not to come. I told you to let me die." "And you burned everything. Your father's plan, your name, your whole life. All of it. For me." "Yes." "Why?" He was quiet a moment. Outside, the dark countryside streamed past, and somewhere behind them a war was being born that would swallow 2 families whole. And it was his fault. And he found he could not make himself regret it. "Because I did the arithmetic 1,000 times," he said quietly. "1 life against 40 years. It's not close. Any soldier can do that sum, and I was the best soldier my father ever made." He pressed his lips to her hair. "But every time I did it, I got the wrong answer. Because you were never one life to me, Renata. You were the only life. The plan was 40 years of ice. You were the only warm thing in all of it. And a man doesn't trade the only warm thing he's ever had for anything. Not the world, not his father, not his own life. His arms tightened. I chose wrong by every rule I was ever taught, and I'd choose it again 1,000 times and get it wrong 1,000 times, and it would be the only right thing I ever did. She pulled back to look at him. The face she'd made, the man beneath it, the cold thing gone entirely now, burned away in a house full of enemies, leaving only this, a man who loved her enough to lose everything. "Your father is going to come for you," she whispered. "Antonio is going to come for both of us. You just started a war, Gio. We can't outrun this." "No," he agreed. "We can't outrun it." Something hardened in his eyes, not the old cold, but something new, something forged. "So we're not going to run. We're going to end it, both of them. The whole rotten world that thinks it can use you as a leash around my throat." He looked at Danny in the mirror, then back at her. "I have one card left, Renata. One. And it's the most dangerous thing I've ever done. But if it works," his jaw set, "if it works, then no one ever gets to threaten you again. Not my father, not Antonio, no one." "What card?" Gio Bellini looked out at the dark, at the war he'd started, at the ruins of 40 years, and at the woman he'd chosen over all of it. "The truth," he said. "The whole truth, to the one man who doesn't know it yet." He took out a phone, a burner, clean, untraceable, and began, at last, to dial the number he'd refused to call. His father's. Don Matteo Bellini answered on the second ring, and his voice, when it came, was the voice of a man who already knew. "Salvatore called me an hour ago," the old man said. "No greeting. He told me everything. He told me you knew he'd tell me, and that you asked him to wait 12 hours, and that he waited 11. So he betrayed you a little, and stayed loyal to you a little, which is the most a consigliere can ever manage." A pause, heavy as a tombstone. "You threw it away, Giovanni. 40 years, your brothers in cells, everything. For a woman." "Yes," Gio said. "You destroyed the plan. You confessed to Antonio Rossi. You started the war I spent my whole life trying to avoid." "Yes." The silence stretched so long that Gio thought the line had died. Renata watched his face in the passing streetlights, and Danny drove, and the war waited. "When your mother died," Don Matteo said finally, and his voice had changed, gone somewhere old and unguarded that Gio had never heard. "You were 14. And I made a decision. I decided that I would never again love anything I could lose. Because losing her nearly killed me, Giovanni. It nearly ended me. And I looked at my sons, and I decided to love them the way a general loves soldiers. Usefully, at a distance, ready to spend them for the family. I told myself it was strength. I told myself it was the only way to survive this life." A long, shaking breath. "I made you cold, on purpose. Do you understand? I looked at my youngest boy, and I decided he would be my perfect weapon. because a weapon that cannot love cannot be broken. I did that to you. I did that. Gio closed his eyes. Renata's hand found his. And now you call me, Don Matteo went on, and tell me you threw away my life's work for a woman. And I should be enraged, Giovanni. I should disown you. I should send men to bring you back in chains and finish the war myself over your body. His voice broke, actually broke, this granite old man. But instead, I am sitting here in the dark, an old man who buried his wife rather than lose her slowly. And I am thinking, my son did the thing I was too much of a coward to do. He loved something he could lose, and he chose it, over me, over everything I built. And God help me, Giovanni. A sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. God help me. I am proud of you. For the first time in your life, you did something I could never do. You were brave enough to have a heart. Gio couldn't speak. His throat had closed. Renata was crying silently beside him, her hand crushing his. So, Don Matteo said, and the general returned, but a different general now. The plan is dead. Fine. It was always going to die someday. But the war it started is real, and Antonio Rossi is coming for you and your doctor, and I will not lose another person I love. Not again. Not ever. A breath. You said you have one card left, Salvatore told me, the truth, to the one man who doesn't know it. You meant me. You wanted to tell me yourself, hoping I'd forgive you and help you. A grim warmth. You didn't have to hope, my son. Come home. Bring her. Bring Concetta's boy. He sounds like a man worth keeping. And let me do the last thing a father can do for a son who finally became a man. Let me end this war for you, so that you and your doctor can have the after that I never let myself have with your mother. Papa! It was the first time Gio had called him that in 20 years. Come home, Giovanni. The old man's voice was thick. All is forgiven, all of it. Come home and let your father protect the thing you love. It is the only apology I know how to make for the son I made too cold to live. Come home. And bring the woman who thawed him. The line went dead. Gio lowered the phone. For a moment he simply stared at it, this man who had spent his life believing his father incapable of anything but calculation. And Renata watched something 20 years frozen finally crack open in his chest. He forgave you, she whispered. He did more than that. Gio's voice was raw. He said... He stopped, started again. My whole life I thought he made me cold because he didn't love me. He made me cold because he loved me too much and had decided love was a weakness he couldn't survive twice. He looked at her, and his eyes were wet and clear and completely, finally, unguarded. You didn't just save me from a room full of killers tonight, Renata. You saved my father from 40 years of frozen grief. He heard what I did for you, and it thawed something in him that's been ice since my mother died. A broken laugh. You're a dermatologist. You reconstruct faces, and somehow you reconstructed two of the coldest men in New York without lifting a scalpel. Danny spoke from the front, dry as sand. So, home then? To the Don's estate? Home, Gio said. And then, tightening his arm around Renata, his jaw setting into something new, not cold, but steel, forged in fire instead of ice. And then we finish it. All three of us against Antonio Rossi. The plan is dead, but the family isn't, and a family that finally remembers how to love, he looked down at her, is more dangerous than any plan ever was. Behind them, the war gathered. Ahead, the house of his father waited, and for the first time in his life, Gio Bellini was driving toward it not as a weapon, but as a man with everything to lose, and everything, at last, to fight for. The war lasted 11 days, and Renata lived every hour of it in the fortress the Bellini estate became. She was not a soldier. She knew nothing of the movements that filled those days, the quiet phone calls, the men who came and went at strange hours, the maps spread on Don Matteo's great table, the way Salvatore's face grew greyer and Gio's grew harder and clearer with each passing night. She only knew that a war was being fought around her, for her, and that the two coldest men in New York had thrown the full weight of 40 years of accumulated power against the family that had dared to put a leash on the thing Giovanni Bellini loved. What she saw, she never forgot. She saw Don Matteo, the old man who had designed his son's damnation, emerge from his frozen grief like a bear from a cave, terrible and magnificent, and pour every resource, every favour, every buried debt of 40 years into a single purpose, the protection of the woman his son loved. "I spent my life," he told her once, over coffee in the grey dawn, while the war moved in the dark beyond the walls, making certain my family could not be touched. I told myself it was for my sons. It was really so that I would never again feel what I felt when their mother died. He'd looked at her with his son's dark eyes. "You've given me a chance to use all that power for the thing it was always secretly for, to protect love instead of preventing it. Thank you, Doctor. Whatever happens, thank you for that." She saw Gio become something she'd never seen. Not the cold asset, not the desperate man on his knees in Antonio's house, but a leader. The war had burned the ice out of him and left behind steel, and the men who'd once spat his name as a traitor now learned the truth and followed him into the dark, because a man who would burn 40 years for love was a man who would burn the world for the people who followed him. He led from the front. He was, his father said with grim pride, better than any of them had ever imagined, because now, at last, he was fighting for something instead of merely being spent, and she saw the war turn. Antonio Rossi had prepared for many things in his 60 years. He had not prepared for the full, unified, thawed fury of the Bellini family. He had counted on the plan being dead and the family being fractured, Don Matteo enraged at his son, the operation in ruins, the Bellinis turning on each other. Instead, he faced a family more dangerous than the one his plots had ever imagined. Not a cold machine executing a 40-year design, but something with a heart, and therefore something willing to do things no cold calculation would ever permit. On the 11th day, it ended. Renata never learned all the details, and Gio never offered them, and she understood that some mercies are best left unspoken. She knew only that Salvatore came into the room where she waited with Concetta, and that his grey face was, for the first time in 11 days, unclenched, and that he said, very simply, "It's over." Antonio Rossi is finished. His organization is gone. Not one shot fired in the street, not one headline, not one thing for the police to find. A thin, exhausted smile, just as your Giovanni always wanted. Silent, clean, complete. And Gio? Coming up the drive now, unhurt. Salvatore's eyes softened. Go to him, doctor. He's been fighting a war for 11 days to earn the right to walk through that door to you. Don't make him wait a second longer. She was down the stairs and across the great hall and through the front doors before Salvatore had finished speaking. Gio was climbing out of a car in the grey evening light, and he was tired, and there was a healing cut on his jaw that she would tend later, and he looked up and saw her, and stopped completely still, the way he had the very first day, when she'd walked into a dim room and looked at his ruined face, and refused to be afraid. Then she was in his arms, and he was holding her like a man who has crossed hell on foot to get home, and neither of them spoke for a long time, because some things are too large for words. "It's over," he said finally, into her hair. "All of it. Antonio, the war, the threat. No one is ever going to use you against me again, Renata. No one is ever going to touch you. I promise you that. And this time," he pulled back to look at her, "this time it's a promise this world will let me keep, because there's no one left to break it." "And the mission? The plan?" "Dead." He said it without a flicker of regret. 40 years gone because I chose you. My father's masterpiece in ruins. He smiled, and it was the smile she'd fallen in love with, warm and unguarded and entirely hers. "And do you know the strange thing? The family's clean anyway. The Rossis were the only thing standing in the way of my father going legitimate, the only rivals ugly enough to drag us back into the gutter. And now they're gone. So the plan died, but it worked, just not the way anyone designed. It worked because I loved you enough to blow it up, and blowing it up today." A rough laugh. "My father says God has a sense of humour. I'm starting to believe him." "So it's really over." "It's really over." He cupped her face in his hands, the hands that had killed, that had held a gun in a rival's mouth, that now held her like she was the only fragile thing in a world he'd break himself to protect. "And now, Renata Silva, we get the thing this world never lets people like us have. We get an after." His voice dropped, thick with everything he'd never let himself want. "Marry me. Come out of the ice with me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that loving you wasn't the thing that destroyed me. It was the thing that finally let me live." And Renata Silva, the girl from the favela, the doctor who'd said yes for money and stayed for love, the woman who'd broken a bottle for bread and refused to be afraid of the most dangerous man in New York, looked at the face she had made and the man she had thawed and the after she'd never believed she'd get. "Yes," she said. "God help us both. Yes." 1 year later, the smell of lemon cake filled a house in the Hudson Valley, and Giovanni Bellini stood very still in the doorway of the kitchen and let it undo him. Renata was at the counter, flour on her hands, a recipe card propped against the window. His mother's recipe, tracked down through Concetta, who had gotten it from an aunt who had gotten it from a cousin who'd worked in the Bellini kitchen 40 years ago. She hadn't told him she was making it. She'd only asked weeks ago, in the offhand way she asked things she'd already decided, whether he remembered how it smelled. He remembered. He was 14 again, and his mother was alive, and everything was simple. "You're crying," Renata said, without turning around, because she knew his step in the dark, and his silences in the light, and every other thing about him now. "I made you cry with a cake. I'll take it." "You made me cry with a cake," he agreed, crossing the kitchen to wrap his arms around her from behind, his chin on her shoulder, his hands over her flowery ones. "You reconstruct faces for a living, and somehow the most impressive thing you've ever done is a lemon cake." "Second most." She turned in his arms. She was wearing his ring, and beneath the flower and the apron, just beginning to show, the curve of the second most impressive thing she'd ever make. "This one's still ahead of the cake." Gio's hand spread over the small swell of her belly, and his throat closed the way it did every time. This man who had been made cold on purpose by a father terrified of love, who had spent 34 years as a weapon, who had burned 40 years of his family's design, rather than lose her. "A child," he said, the wonder of it still raw. "In this family. Growing up with the smell of lemon cake instead of gunpowder. Growing up clean." Because it was clean now. That was the strangest and most beautiful thing. The war with the Rossis had, in ending them, removed the last obstacle to everything Don Matteo had spent his life reaching for. The Bellini family had gone legitimate, really, truly legitimate. Real estate, restaurants, construction, taxed, legal, beyond the reach of any prosecutor or any bullet. The old man had gotten his clean name for his grandchildren after all, and he'd gotten it not through his cold masterpiece of a plan, but through the fire of a son who'd loved a woman enough to burn the plan down. "My father wants to name it," Gio said, "if it's a boy. He has opinions. Strong ones." "Your father can want a great many things," Renata smiled, licking flour from her thumb. "Your father, who spent 40 years frozen solid, now shows up every Sunday with impossible toys and cries during commercials. Your father is a changed man." "You changed him." Gio pressed his forehead to hers. "You changed all of us." The coldest family in New York, thawed by a dermatologist from Sao Paulo, who said yes for money and stayed for love. He kissed her, slow and certain, the kiss of a man who no longer had to steal his happiness in the dark. "Do you ever think about it? That first night. You looked at my ruined face and refused to be afraid. And I looked at you and thought, that one's going to be a problem. You were right. I was so right." He laughed, low and warm. "You were the best problem of my life." Later, when the cake was cooling and the light had gone gold across the river, they walked the grounds together the way they did every evening. The man who used to be a weapon, and the woman who'd remade him, and the child between them, who would grow up never knowing what either of them had survived to make her possible. At the edge of the lawn, where the trees gave way to the wide black water, Renata stopped and looked back at the house, lit and warm, a place where a war had been planned, and a family had been thawed, and a lemon cake now cooled on a windowsill. Do you ever regret it? She asked. The plan, the mission, everything you gave up, your whole life pointed at one thing, and you threw it away for me. Do you ever— No. He didn't let her finish. He took her face in his hands, the face he loved more than the one she'd given him, and his dark eyes were clear and warm and entirely without ice. Renata, listen to me. My father built me to be a weapon that couldn't love, because he thought love was the thing that would destroy me. And he was right about everything, except which way it would go. He kissed her forehead, her cheek, her lips. Love didn't destroy me. It was the only thing that ever saved me. Everything I was before you was ice. Everything I am now is because you looked at a ruined man and decided to make something beautiful out of him instead of running. His voice roughened. You didn't just reconstruct my face, Renata. You reconstructed me. And I would burn that plan down 1,000 times and 1,000 times more for one more evening walking this lawn with you and the smell of my mother's cake coming from a house that's finally warm. She leaned into him, and the river ran black and endless below them, and the house glowed gold behind them, and inside her the future kicked, small and fierce and clean. Then it was worth it, she said softly. All of it. The pact, the silence, the lies, the winter. All of it, he agreed. Every second of the cold, because it led here, to this, to you. And Giovanni Bellini, the ghost, the asset, the perfect weapon, the traitor who was never a traitor, the coldest man in New York, held the woman who had thawed him in the warm gold light of a house that was finally a home, and understood at last the only truth that had ever mattered, that the most dangerous thing a man like him could ever do was love someone, and that it was also, it turned out, the only thing worth living for. The pact of silence was broken, and in its place, at last, they had built something that needed no secrets at all.